The night shifts are a time when the world turns quiet, and the ordinary can quickly turn unsettling. I never imagined a simple job would become a haunting experience I'd carry with me for the rest of my life. Let me tell you about the scariest shift I've ever worked. It started like any other night, but ended with something I can never forget. I was working the night shift at a gas station on the outskirts of town, where only a few cars passed by in the dead of night. My manager always told me the place got so little traffic that I could bring a book or something to keep myself entertained. So I usually did. It was just me and the buzzing of the overhead lights, the occasional hum of a car driving past, and the rattle of an old air conditioner unit that never really worked quite right. That night, around 2 a.m., the store was empty, as it always was at that hour. I was behind the counter, half reading some dog-eared crime novel, when I noticed the old security camera in the corner of the room blink. It was an ancient system, and usually I didn't pay it much attention, but this time something caught my eye. The monitor displayed 4 different angles, one inside the store, one showing the pumps, one for the parking lot, and one showing the back alley. As I glanced at the screen, I saw something move in the parking lot, just a flicker. It was subtle, like a shadow slipping out of view. I focused my attention, trying to make out what it was, but the lot was empty. I was about to turn away when I saw it again, this time clearer. A figure moved across the screen, just out of reach of the light above the pumps, staying in the shadows. The camera quality was grainy, but it looked like a man, tall, maybe wearing a hoodie. He was pacing slowly, moving from one side of the lot to the other. My heart rate picked up, but I tried to stay calm. People loitered sometimes, especially drunk teenagers who'd been kicked out of whatever party they'd been at. I decided I'd give it a few minutes before going out to tell him to move along. But as I watched the screen, the figure stopped moving and turned, staring straight at the camera. A chill ran down my spine. Though I couldn't make out his face, something about the way he stood, frozen, staring, made me uneasy. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was just a camera glitch, maybe some stray light reflecting off the lens. I glanced out the window toward the lot, but there was nothing there. The lot was empty, bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the overhead lights. Then I looked back at the monitor. The figure had moved closer, now standing right by the pumps. He was still in the shadows, but his head was turned towards the store, like he was watching me. My skin prickled, and I felt a bead of sweat trickle down my back. I picked up the store phone, my fingers hovering over the numbers, ready to dial the police if needed. That's when the lights above the pumps flickered and went out. The only illumination left was from the faint glow inside the store, and on the screen, I saw the figure disappear into the darkness. My heart pounded as I scanned the lot through the glass windows, but it was pitch black outside. The lights over the pumps had never gone out before. Not once in the entire year I had worked there. I reached under the counter, grabbing the flashlight we kept for power outages, and decided to go check it out. I could hear my own breathing, louder than the hum of the store lights. I knew I shouldn't go out there, but there was something about the dark, that heavy quiet, that felt like it was pressing in on me, demanding action. As I stepped outside, the chill night air hit me, and the beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness. I swept it across the pumps. Nothing. The lot was empty. I moved closer to the pump area, shining the light around, looking for any sign of the figure. Then, behind me, I heard it. A shuffling sound, like feet scraping against the gravel. I spun around, the flashlight trembling in my hand, but there was no one there. I scanned the area again, the circle of light flickering across the empty lot. My gut twisted with fear. I backed up slowly towards the store, every instinct screaming at me to get back inside and lock the door. Just as I reached the door, I heard something from the back alley, a soft, dragging sound. It was coming from the direction of the camera that faced the rear of the building. Against my better judgment, I pointed the flashlight toward the alley and took a few hesitant steps forward. What I saw made my blood run cold. A shape low to the ground, moving slowly, almost crawling. It looked human, but distorted. Its limbs were long, too long, bending at odd angles. The figure dragged itself along the pavement, its head lolling from side to side as if it was searching for something. The light caught its eyes, or where its eyes should have been, dark hollow sockets that reflected nothing. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The figure stopped moving. It lifted its head, and though it had no eyes, I could feel it looking at me. I turned and ran, bursting through the door, slamming it behind me, and locking it. My hands were shaking so badly that I nearly dropped the flashlight. I backed away from the door, my eyes fixed on the glass, expecting to see the figure following me. But there was nothing, just the empty lot. I looked back at the monitor, and my heart sank. The cameras were all down. Every single feed showed nothing but static. I was alone, cut off, with no way to see what was out there. Then the banging started. Slow, deliberate, a heavy thud against the back door. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. The sound echoed through the empty store, each bang louder than the last. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, my voice barely a whisper as I told the operator that someone was trying to break in. The banging stopped. The store was dead silent, the only sound my own panicked breathing. I stayed on the line with the operator, staring at the door, waiting for it to burst open. Minutes felt like hours, and then in the distance, I heard the sirens. Red and blue lights flashed across the lot as a patrol car pulled in, and 2 officers stepped out. I ran to the door, unlocking it and waving them in, my entire body trembling with fear and relief. They searched the lot, the pumps and the back alley but found nothing. No signs of anyone, or anything. The officers told me it was probably just a prank, maybe some kids messing around. They offered to stay until my shift ended, but I could tell by the looks on their faces that they thought I was overreacting. But I know what I saw. I quit the night shift after that. I couldn't keep working there, not knowing what was out in that darkness, watching, waiting. Even now, I can't shake the feeling that whatever it was is still out there, somewhere, searching for me. So if you ever find yourself alone, working the night shift, and you see something strange on the cameras, something that shouldn't be there, trust your instincts. And whatever you do, don't go outside. I didn't sleep that night. Even after the officers left, I stayed in the store, sitting behind the counter with the lights on, staring at the door until the morning shift came in to replace me. When I finally got home, exhaustion hit me like a wave, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shape crawling across the ground, those dark, empty sockets staring right at me. For a week, I barely left my apartment. I kept my curtains drawn and double-checked that the doors were locked. I even started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, though I knew it wouldn't do much if whatever that thing was ever found me. I tried to convince myself it was just a prank, just some guy in a costume messing around. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that what I saw wasn't human. There was something wrong with it. Something that felt old and wrong, like it came from a place where nothing good existed. I started thinking maybe it wasn't even meant to be seen by someone like me, that I had accidentally stumbled into something beyond my understanding, and now it knew I was there. A few days later, I got a call from my old manager. He told me the new guy they'd hired for my night shift had quit. I asked why, and he said the guy had been spooked by something he saw on the cameras. Something about a man standing in the shadows by the pumps, watching him. The guy ran out before the end of his shift and never came back. My heart sank. I tried to tell my manager what I'd seen, but he just laughed it off, said it was probably some crackhead wandering around, nothing to worry about. But I knew it wasn't just a random person. There was something else, something that wanted to be seen. The next night, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my manager. It was a voice I didn't recognize, and it was trembling. "Hey, you used to work the night shift at the gas station, right?" the voice asked. "Who is this?" I demanded. "My name's Chris," he said. "I'm working your old shift now." I got your number from the schedule they keep in the back. I know this sounds crazy, but I need to know if you've seen anything strange. Like, on the cameras. My blood ran cold. I knew where this was going, but I asked anyway, my voice barely a whisper. "What did you see?" There was silence on the other end, then Chris spoke again, his voice cracking. "I saw someone. In the back alley. He was crawling, man. Like an animal. His arms and legs were all twisted, and he just kept staring at the camera." My stomach twisted in knots. I could hear the fear in Chris's voice, the same fear I'd felt that night, and I knew this wasn't just a coincidence. Whatever it was still there. Still watching. "You need to leave," I said, my voice urgent. "Right now, get out of there and don't look back." But, Chris started to say, but I cut him off. "Listen to me," I said, "it's not a joke. Just leave. Call the cops if you have to, but do not stay there." There was a pause, and then Chris said, "Okay. I'm leaving now." He hung up, and I was left sitting in my dark apartment, my heart racing. I knew what I had to do. I couldn't just sit there, waiting for the next person to take that shift, the next person to see whatever was out there. I had to go back. I had to see for myself. I drove to the gas station that night. The place was empty, the lights above the pumps flickering like they always did. I parked across the street, far enough away that I could watch without being seen. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, my eyes scanning the lot, waiting for something, anything, to happen. Hours passed, and nothing. The place was as quiet as it always was, the only sound the distant hum of traffic from the highway. I started to think maybe I was losing my mind, that maybe it really had just been some crazy guy messing around. But then I saw it. A shadow moved across the lot, just out of reach of the light. My breath caught in my throat as I watched it, the shape slowly crawling across the ground, its limbs bending in unnatural ways. It moved closer to the pumps, staying in the darkness, and then it stopped. It turned its head, and even from where I was sitting, I could feel it looking at me. I wanted to run, to get in my car and drive as far away as I could, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, my eyes locked on that figure as it slowly began to rise, its body unfolding, limbs straightening until it stood tall, taller than any person I'd ever seen. It took a step forward, and then another, moving towards the store, its head still turned towards me. I don't know how I did it, but I finally managed to tear my eyes away. I started the car, my hands trembling so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I drove away, not looking back, my heart pounding in my ears. I never went back to that gas station. I heard later that it had closed down, something about a robbery gone wrong. But I knew the truth. Whatever it was still out there, still waiting, still watching. And I knew that as long as I stayed away, as long as I didn't go looking for it again, I might just be okay. But sometimes, late at night, I still see it in my dreams. That shadow crawling across the ground, those dark, empty sockets staring right at me. And I wonder if one day, it'll find me again. The nightmares became more frequent after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see it, always the same distorted figure, its limbs twisting, crawling, then rising, looming over me, just watching. Sometimes, I'd hear it too. That slow, dragging sound that scraped through my skull and chilled my bones. The nightmares felt so real that more than once, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, half expecting to find it standing over my bed, watching me sleep. I tried to move on. I really did. I took on a new job at a shipping company, working day shifts only, but even then, it felt like a piece of that gas station had followed me. I'd catch myself glancing over my shoulder, feeling eyes on me when there was no one there. Paranoia had become my constant companion. A month passed, and just when I started to think I might be able to forget, I got another call. It was late at night, the sky outside inky black, and the moment I heard the phone ring, dread settled deep in my gut. The voice on the other end was frantic, rushed, almost unintelligible. It took me a moment to realize who it was. "Chris," I said, my voice cracking with fear. "You told me to leave," he gasped, his voice cracking. I could hear the sound of wind rushing in the background, and I pictured him running, panting as he spoke. "You told me to get out of there, but it followed me, man. It followed me home." A chill raced down my spine. "What do you mean it followed you? Where are you now?" There was silence on the other end for a moment, and then Chris whispered, "It's outside my apartment. It knows I'm here." My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't know what to say. How could I help him? How could anyone help him? "Listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You need to get out of there, find somewhere public, somewhere with people." But before I could finish, I heard it. A sound in the background, faint but unmistakable. That slow, dragging scrape. Chris whimpered. "It's coming up the stairs," he whispered. "I can hear it." And then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, my whole body shaking. I knew I should call the police, tell them what was happening, but what could I even say? That some thing was after him? That it wasn't human? I doubted they'd believe me, even if they did go to his apartment. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring again, waiting for some kind of sign that Chris was okay. But the call never came. The next day, I searched the local news, hoping I wouldn't find anything, but there it was, a small article about a young man found dead in his apartment. No signs of foul play, no forced entry. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. I knew what had happened. I knew it had found him. Panic settled in my chest like a heavy weight. If it had followed Chris, then maybe it could follow me too. I started thinking about every place I'd been, every person I'd interacted with since that night at the gas station. Had I brought it with me? Was it watching me, waiting for the right moment to make itself known again? I couldn't stay in my apartment. The walls felt too close, the air too thick. I packed a bag, grabbed my car keys, and just started driving. I didn't know where I was going, I just needed to get away. Away from the gas station, away from Chris's apartment, away from the shadows that seemed to creep closer every time I looked away. I ended up at a motel on the edge of town, a rundown place that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 70s. The neon sign outside flickered, casting eerie, shifting shadows across the parking lot. It wasn't much, but it was better than being alone in my apartment. I paid for a room in cash, hoping that if I kept moving, maybe it wouldn't be able to find me. That night, I locked the door, bolted the windows, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the old TV set in the corner. I turned it on, hoping the noise would drown out the silence, but the static that filled the screen only made me feel more alone. I flipped through the channels, trying to find something, anything, to keep my mind occupied. And then, the picture cut out. The screen went black, and for a moment, I just stared at it, waiting for it to come back. But instead of the show I'd been watching, the screen flickered, and an image appeared.
My heart stopped. It was the gas station.
The security camera feed, black and white, grainy.
The pumps, the lot, the back alley.
And there, in the corner of the screen, a figure moved. I watched, my breath caught in my throat, as the figure crawled across the lot, its limbs bending, twisting, its head turning towards the camera.
Towards me.
I fumbled for the remote, my hands trembling so badly I could barely press the buttons. I tried to change the channel, turn off the TV, but nothing worked. The screen stayed the same, the figure growing closer, until it filled the screen, its hollow eyes staring at me. I threw the remote across the room, the plastic cracking as it hit the wall, and the TV finally went dark. The motel room was silent, the only sound my own ragged breathing. I knew then that running wouldn't save me. It had found me, just like it had found Chris. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. I didn't sleep that night, or the night after. I kept moving, driving from town to town, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. I avoided dark corners, stayed away from cameras, but it didn't matter. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. Every time I let my guard down, I felt it, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I can keep this up. Maybe it's only a matter of time before it catches up to me, before I end up like Chris, just another story no one will believe.
But until then, I'll keep running.
So if you ever find yourself alone at night, working a shift, or sitting in a motel room, and you see something on a screen that shouldn't be there, something moving in the shadows, something that looks almost human but not quite, turn it off.
Get out. Don't wait.
Because once it knows you've seen it, there's no escaping it. And it's always watching. I didn't know how long I could keep running. Each town I passed through blurred into the next, each cheap motel room like the last. The exhaustion was wearing me down. I was starting to wonder if it might be better to just stop, to let it come and finish this once and for all.
But then something changed.
I was driving through a stretch of empty highway, the sky a dull gray, and the feeling hit me. That creeping sensation that something was watching me, that something was just out of sight, waiting for me to notice it. I glanced in the rearview mirror, expecting to see nothing, just the empty road stretching into the distance.
But there it was.
A shadow far back, almost blending into the haze of the road, but unmistakable. It was moving, keeping pace with my car. My hands gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. It was following me in broad daylight. It wasn't hiding anymore. It wanted me to know it was there. I had a decision to make, keep running or face it. Somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the realization that I couldn't keep living like this. Whatever it was, I knew that this was where it had to end. I took a deep breath, turned the wheel, and pulled off the road, onto a gravel path leading into a field. The car bumped and jostled as I drove, the tall grass brushing against the windows. I drove until the road ended, until I was surrounded by nothing but empty fields and the sky above. I turned off the engine, the sudden silence almost deafening. My heart pounded in my chest as I got out of the car, standing in the open, feeling the wind whip around me. I turned and looked back. It was there, at the edge of the field, the shadow slowly taking form. It was taller than I remembered, its limbs elongated, too thin, its head cocked to one side as if curious. It took a step forward, and then another, moving towards me with that strange, almost crawling gait. I could feel the fear rising in me, threatening to swallow me whole, but I held my ground. I had spent so long running from this thing, so long letting it control my life. I wasn't going to run anymore.
What do you want?
I shouted, my voice carried away by the wind. Why are you following me? The figure paused, just a few yards away, its head tilting to the other side. For a moment, it almost looked human, almost like it was trying to understand me. I stared at it, and in that moment, something strange happened. The fear that had gripped me for so long started to fade. I realized that whatever this thing was, it fed on that fear. It had followed me because I had let it, because I had given it power over me. I took a step forward, and the figure flinched, as if surprised. I took another step, my heart pounding, but this time not with fear, with determination. You don't control me, I said, my voice steady. I'm not afraid of you anymore. The figure seemed to waver, its form flickering, almost like it was losing substance. The dark hollows where its eyes should have been stared at me, and for the first time, I thought I saw something else there, something like confusion, or maybe even fear. I took another step, and the figure began to retreat, its body folding in on itself, the darkness pulling back. It moved away, back towards the edge of the field, its shape growing smaller and smaller until it was nothing more than a shadow, and then, nothing at all. Just the empty field, the wind rustling through the grass. I stood there for a long time, the adrenaline slowly draining from my body, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief.
It was gone.
I didn't know if it was gone for good, or if it would ever come back, but for now it was gone. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like they might give out at any moment, and slumped into the driver's seat. I took a deep breath, then another, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt free. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know if it was a ghost, a demon, or just some figment of my imagination brought to life by fear. Maybe it was something that had always existed, feeding off the terrified, the lost, the vulnerable. But I do know one thing: it thrived because I let it, because I gave it power. I started the car and drove back to the main road, the sun breaking through the clouds, warming my face through the windshield. I still had no destination, no plan, but that was okay. I was alive, and I was no longer running. If you ever feel that creeping fear, if you ever see something out of the corner of your eye that shouldn't be there, remember this: it only has power if you give it power.
Stand your ground. Face it.
Don't let the darkness control you. Because sometimes, the only way to survive is to stop running, and make the shadows fear you instead.